And then I will address also the cost and benefits from going into green architecture. And then looking into the evaluation systems used around the world for green buildings. And then we'll shed some lights on the following two questions. Will green buildings become a mainstream, or it's a fashion that will fade away after a while? And also, what are the some of the key barriers that holding many people back from adopting green architecture? So to put things in context, it's very fortunate to have James before me today to address the issue at the city level. So that big circle, which actually he addressed, the green sustainable city, I'm actually not addressing this at all. There is another small layer of this, which is the green sustainable neighborhood, and I'm also not addressing this. My talk will focus onto the green building, okay, and the at the building level. It will be sometimes extended to the sustainable neighborhood, but the focus will remain to be on green buildings. Okay, I'm sure that all of you are aware that our profession is causing a disaster to the globe. Okay, 40% of the resources utilized and used is actually coming from buildings. And these are the stats for the US buildings. And the stats of the Gulf countries are not very different. So 39% of the total energy consumption is actually inside buildings. 71% of electricity consumption is from buildings. Not surprisingly, not from manufacturing. 39% of CO2 emissions is from buildings. 30% of the raw materials are used in buildings. And 30% of the waste outputs, again, are coming from buildings. So, and 20% of potable water consumption are from buildings. So this actually raises the attention of where the focus should be. We need to really focus on our buildings and how we can make them sustainable. Okay, this is the definition that Professor Steele used in his presentation. And it's actually United Nations definition. We would like to design and build our building without compromising the ability of the future generations. Green buildings, to the other end, is design and construction practices that significantly reduce and eliminate the negative impact of buildings on the environment and its occupants. So the green buildings fluctuates between professions, and how people look at it, they look at it surprisingly very differently. Architects and designers tend to reference green based on buildings materials and design. Owners and developers focus more on building systems and operations. It's comfort versus profit. And green buildings is not a color. So it's not actually coloring the building to look green like these examples. Green buildings are a set of strategies and values, and they are not architectural style. So it is not by introducing plants into our buildings will become greener. It's actually a set of strategies that we have to adopt of course, at the planning level, and certainly at the design level, in order for our buildings to become green buildings. There is a confusion actually in the academia and in the profession. When people say sustainable, do they mean green? And when they say green, do they mean sustainable? And here are some statistics about the utilizations of the words around different places in the world. So you'll find in UK, the most often reference is sustainable. And then they use green less. But in USA, it raises, the level of using green is more. And the currency or the occurrence of using sustainable is less. So it differs from a place to a place. And these are some statistics, And when people actually talk about sustainability or green or use them interchangeably, these are the stats of the issues that are raised. So you look at energy efficiency, energy sources, water, waste, and the list goes on. So that's when people talk about sustainability and talk about green, not at the same time they mean the same thing. And they don't always have the same focus. But the attributes and their importance in green buildings and sustainable buildings, it's shown here. Energy efficiency happens to take to be the most important factor, and longevity of the building is the least, and the rest are in between, including water, waste, transport, access, pollution, etc. I'm trying to actually make the best utilization of the 3 minutes. That's why I'm running fast. Okay, so the question is, why should we go green? Is to enhance the building's overall performance while improving the comfort. So when there are common traits when people talk about green buildings, okay, these are some of the issues that pop up, and they take most of the focus when you design a green buildings. Location, site, building exterior, building interior, and there are also hidden attributes in between. And one of the interesting models of looking into green architecture is to look at it from a holistic perspective. So you would have the sustainable, the ecological, and the performance part. And for each of these components, there are elements and resources and environmental issues. So when addressing green architecture, you are not only looking at the performance, but you are looking at the sustainability, the ecological, and the performance as well. And that actually makes the formula of looking into green architecture. And this is somewhat a matrix that can be used for someone to actually direct the focus when talking about green architecture. Of course, there are some advantages of going into green architecture. Okay, the cost savings. People would be surprised to say, okay, green architecture costs less. They don't cost much, as I will go in the presentation later on. So first, cost savings and ongoing operation expense reduction. Minimize the impact on the environment, enhance health and productivity, increased value, community and social benefits, minimize energy consumption, and utilizing alternate resources for building operation, in addition to replacing fossil fuels based on power and renewable sources of energy. Okay, if you look actually at the cost, LEED, as I will refer to it in the following slides, is one of the environmental evaluation systems that is utilized in the United States. It refers to leadership in energy and environmental analysis, environmental design. So if you're designing a building that's going to be certified by LEEDs, the extra cost, if you are only going for the first level of certification, is 0.66% extra money. It's not much. And if you're going for the platinum, like the example of King Abdullah University, it's actually 6.5% extra. So the misconception and the mythology about the energy buildings and sustainable buildings cost more, and that's why people actually turn away from them, is not very true. There are some other key barriers that I will address later. And these are another, again, one matrix of identifying the benefits to the occupant, to the neighbor, to the owner, to the developer, to the designer, and to the investors in terms of economy, health, risk reduction, climate change, ecological, decreased infrastructure, and occupant comfort. You will find it evident for the occupant to be for comfort, for the owner to be for the risk reduction, for the designer to be in the economic, and for the investor to be in the risk reduction and economy. Here is a matrix that I've developed looking into the most dominant green evaluation systems around the world, starting from UK. UK has the BREEAM, which is started in 1990, and the most recent one is in Germany in 2009. So I looked across those span of 20 years almost, and what I did a comparative analysis, and this comparative analysis is looking at the issues. And you will find here, if you look at LEEDs, for example, okay, that's USA, that's LEEDs, you will find the least checklist of the items covered in green building is a LEEDs. Okay, so, but there are others that seem to be more comprehensive, and there are issues happening again in our area. So in our area, Istidama is well established now in the United Arab Emirates, and Istidama is the LEEDs version of United Arab Emirates. But to be honest, it's not very much different from LEEDs. In Qatar, they established a QSAS, which is the Qatar Sustainability Assessment Building. And this is the first time when they addressed cultural guidelines. And surprisingly, LEEDs now is introducing context guidelines and culture guidelines. So there is infusion between different systems from different parts around the globe. In Jordan, there is the Green Building Council, and also in Egypt. And most recently, this month, okay, 2 weeks ago, the first forum for green buildings took place in Saudi Arabia, in Riyadh. So the movement is gaining momentum in our part of the world, and that's interesting, but it has to be more than a movement. It needs to be bought in by the designers, by the real estate agency, by the developers, by the Chamber of Commerce, by the people involved in the decision making to make this reality than a media fashion. So if we look at the reality, it would be interesting to know what the property developers think about green buildings. Okay? In a survey that was conducted, this is what they say. They say it's an interesting but questionable concept that they may have to engage with to obtain planning permission, certification, which is likely to both increase their cost and reduce their profits. Okay, now in the States, there is a minimum. In order to get a building permit, you need at least, in some of the states, you need to have the 10% of the energy produced inside the building. Okay, and so people may tend to go with green buildings guidelines and checklists because they would like to obtain the permits, the permission to build the building. But it has to go beyond that. This is just a start. And also, they would say not sufficiently profitable. So, I mean, that's what the real estate is after most of the time. Okay, if we would like to clear these mythologies about green buildings, okay, you design it to look how you want. So it doesn't have to be green. It could go back to what James was saying, the wisdoms from the tradition. But it's green. And also, there is one mythology over there that every green building, every sustainable building has to be green. That's not correct. Okay, but every green building must be sustainable. So you cannot claim that there is a green building is not sustainable, but every sustainable building not necessarily has to be green because it simply could be ecotech, it could be ecological technology, it could be based on the high tech, etc. Finished? Okay. Okay. To conclude, in green buildings, you need focus, and the focus needs to be into the total cost. Let's say it's 4 million riyal, $4 million. Okay, in normal buildings, the initial cost is 2, let's say 50%, and then the expenses goes into 50%. In green buildings, you need to spend more at the conceptual design stage. You need to bring everyone involved in at the early beginning, so you are expected to spend more and save later. Okay? Okay, well, let's keep the key barriers. Okay, green buildings are moving up the experience curve. Green buildings is inevitable, is not a fashion. It is something that is going to be with us for a long time because it's about where we are and what we do and where we live in and our limited resources. And if we have infinite resources, the issue of sustainability and green would not have ever emerged. Thank you very much.
شكرا دكتور ربيع على التزامك بالوقت وعلى هذا العرض والمعلومات الرائعة حول المباني، أن المباني تستهلك القدر الكبير من الطاقة، فالتعامل مع المبنى إذن راح يوصلنا إلى نتائج على مستوى كبير، وأيضا أن الاستراتيجية